whatever her name was. Has someone that's laying in the back of in the car seat of the pickup. Doesn't look like they're responding. Lots of blood. Bleeding from the hand. Really large open wound. Ma'am, are you awake? Hello?
On the evening of May 18th, 2020, this police officer received a dispatch call about a potential domestic dispute. He was told that one party had already fled the scene and to look out for a Cadillac. He was a 5-minute drive away from the location, and though he got there as fast as he could, those 5 minutes would turn out to be crucial. When he arrived, the Cadillac was nowhere to be seen, and in this red pickup truck, a woman was lying dead. This woman was Tracy Mondabough. She had been stabbed to death outside her own apartment complex as she was parking her car. The officers had to undo her seatbelt to attempt to perform CPR, which was not successful. It was clear that this had been an ambush attack on a defenseless woman. But why? A twisted mess of revenge, loneliness, and online relationships in the pandemic. Let's dive into the tragic story of the death of Tracy Mondabough. This story begins in Ottumwa, Iowa. Previously a meatpacking and manufacturing hub in southeast Iowa, towards the end of the 20th century, its fortunes declined, causing many people to leave for more prosperous cities. But 47-year-old Tracy Mondabough was not one of those people. She was brought up in Ottumwa and had lived there all her life. That life hadn't always been easy. She didn't finish high school, and she exhausted herself working long hours in various fast food restaurants and gas stations. Nevertheless, she got her GED and worked as a certified nursing assistant alongside her part-time service jobs. She was the mother of 4 children, a daughter and 3 sons, but by 2020 they had all grown up, leaving her to lead a fairly solitary, hard-working life. Not much is known about these children or their father, only that Tracy was a caring mother who had always wanted to do right by her family, despite financial difficulty. For months, she walked to and from work because she didn't have a car, often arriving an hour early for her shift and then staying late afterwards. This was a difficult life, and she was trying to make the best of it, when in February 2020, she met a man who would change her life. This was during the very early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic, before it truly hit the US, and before the majority of most people's social lives moved online. Still, Tracy was accidentally ahead of the curve. She was on Facebook one day, midway through February, and she was trying to add the friend of a friend, but she clicked the wrong name and sent the friend request to someone else instead. This someone else was Nick Boat. 41 years old, Nick Boat was a resident of nearby Pella, Iowa, a quality technician at Vermeer, an equipment manufacturing company. He and Tracy turned out to have interests in common, such as an appreciation for the great outdoors and their local Iowa wildlife. Through this happy coincidence, they got talking, first on Facebook and then over the phone, when she gave him her number. They seemed to have found a kindred spirit in each other. Nick eased Tracy's solitary life, while Tracy offered him an escape from his own troublesome personal life, which we'll talk about more in a little bit. On March 8, 2020, Nick took Tracy out on their first date. They already felt like they'd known each other forever, having been talking on the phone almost every day, and Nick tailored their date to their shared interest, the enjoyment of nature. They spent it looking for deer antler sheds around the beautiful Roberts Creek, near his hometown of Pella. They found one, a souvenir to remember the date by. Their second date was less successful. Tracy, being such a hard worker, got stuck at her workplace when her colleague didn't show up for the next shift. Nick, who'd driven the 40 miles from Pella to Ottumwa to meet her there, had to drive back home without seeing her. But this didn't discourage him, and they rescheduled the date for the following weekend. It seemed like a fairy tale romance. They'd been connected by coincidence, and now they were in a relationship. And only a month later, Nick and Tracy moved into an apartment in Pella together. Nick bought her a ring, which she wore proudly, though they were in no rush to get married. They believed they had all the time in the world. She'd met Nick's 2 children, who viewed her as a mother figure, particularly his daughter, who often called Tracy for advice. This was the makings of a new, cohesive family unit. But this is no fairy tale. This is the Decoder. Things were about to go horribly wrong for Tracy Mondabough, who had finally escaped her hometown and thought she'd met the love of her life. On May 18th, 2020, she would be discovered covered in blood in her own truck. But why? How could things go so drastically wrong in so short a space of time? On the evening of May 18th, a nearby resident of the neighborhood was relaxing on her back deck after putting her son to bed when she witnessed a commotion in the parking lot below, which she believed to be a domestic dispute. She called 911.
Power Police Department. Over in the 6 blocks next to me, I just went outside the desk to smoke a cigarette, and it looked like a scuffle between a couple. Well, when I saw her get out of the truck, her face is just all bloody. She looked like she just got in the car and left. This person has a maroon-colored truck, and I don't know what they were fighting over. The horn was honking.
She believed she'd witnessed a couple fighting in the maroon pickup truck. The woman had left soon after, driving away in a Cadillac with blood on her face. This is what the witness told the police dispatcher, and this is what the officers knew about the situation when they arrived at the scene 5 minutes later. But there was another witness, a man who worked with Nick Boat at Vermeer, who also lived nearby.
I heard noises in the back and the drive, horns honking, raising a ruckus.
He went to look to find out what was going on. He saw a red truck and a gray sedan, possibly a Cadillac, and he recognized the red truck as the vehicle that Nick Boat drove.
I could hear women's voices, pretty much like an argument would sound like. I observed one person from the vehicle, I'm assuming that was next to the truck, leaning over in the cab of the other lady that was in the cab of the truck. One person appeared to be sitting in the driver's seat. The other person was sprawled over the top of the person sitting in the seat.
This was key. Where the first witness believed she'd witnessed a couple having an argument, this witness had gotten a clearer view and recognized that something much less ordinary was going on. It was two women, and they were arguing. He couldn't make out much of what they were saying except one phrase.
He doesn't belong to you, he's mine.
This witness's report of the scene made it clear what this shocking attack was about: jealousy and possession. Tracy, sitting in the truck outside the apartment she shared with her new boyfriend Nick, a man she'd found later in life but hoped to share many years with, had been murdered by another woman. And that woman believed she had a claim on Nick. That woman was Michelle Boat. She was Nick's estranged wife, and she'd been following Tracy around all evening. It didn't take the investigators long to make this connection. They ran the plates of the pickup truck, and it came back registered to Nick or Michelle Boat, to whom there was also registered a silver Cadillac, as the witness had described on the 911 call. This Michelle Boat rapidly became a person of interest. They went to her house that same evening, and there they found the Cadillac. The car had bloodstains on it. It also contained some suspicious items.
When I approached the vehicle or looked down inside the passenger window, I noticed down on the passenger side floorboard, there were several items that kind of caught my attention. One was blue rubber gloves. There appeared to be an orange hammer, a gardening spade, and looked like a flat bar or pry bar. Then up on the seat, there was a dark colored purse, a set of binoculars.
They knocked on the door and nobody came to answer it, though the rotors on Michelle's car were still hot, indicating she'd gotten home recently. They waited and called her on the phone to get her to answer the door. Finally, she did. The officers entered the home to talk with her, and one of them went through the house to check that there was no one else there. In the basement, he found that the washing machine was on a cycle, cleaning only one outfit of clothes. This was 17 minutes after the first 911 call. A further search of the residence uncovered her car keys on the bathroom counter, intertwined with a black hair. Michelle was blonde. The investigators also found a pair of rubber gloves in the upper tank of her toilet. These gloves were bloody. This discovery aligned with a discovery being made simultaneously at the scene at Nick and Tracy's apartment. The discovery of the severed fingertip of a latex glove lying on the ground in the parking lot near Tracy's murdered body.
But it also matched the same color of the gloves that I located, or observed, I should say, in the Cadillac back on Prairie Street in the driveway.
This was damning evidence of Michelle's involvement in the death of her husband's girlfriend. The officers took Michelle to the police station. An examination of her hands revealed scratches and bruises that were compatible with Tracy defending herself. The hair found in Tracy's fist, torn out during the attack, was found to match Michelle's DNA. The physical evidence was undeniable, but how had this happened, and why? To understand this horrifying killing, we'll need to dive deeper into Nick's personal life. 20 years earlier, on January 1st, 2000, he'd married Michelle Boat. Michelle was another Iowa native. She worked in the laundry of a nearby hospital, and she was 14 years older than Nick. He was 21 when they got married, she was 35. There's not much information out there about how the two got together, but we do know they had 2 children in those 20 years of marriage, one born in 2000 and one born in 2002. Unfortunately, this time was not happy for Nick Boat. Michelle had been married before, and she told Nick often that she was still in love with her ex-husband. They fought about the kids on a regular basis, as Nick believed Michelle was too harsh with them, and so she would respond harshly to him too. From the very beginning, their relationship had been fraught with tension, and it only got more abusive as time went on. By the beginning of 2020, their marriage had degraded to the point that they were barely talking to each other. And when Nick connected with Tracy on Facebook by some happy coincidence, he told Michelle he had met someone else, and he moved out of their house. According to court filings, they separated on March 11, 2020. This should have been an end to their strife, but it was just the beginning. Across the next few months, Michelle vented publicly about her marital strife. She shared Facebook posts such as this one, asking, "Can you ever stop loving someone?" and a Dar Man sketch about a husband's infidelity with a side chick. But she didn't confine her frustrations to her online presence. 4 days after their official separation, Michelle allegedly assaulted Nick, leaving him with bruises on his back and a cut on his eye. Nick said she was furious she'd left him and refused to grant him a divorce. He used this attack to get a no-contact order, which Michelle proceeded to violate 4 times by calling him and showing up at his workplace. She left him threatening voicemails, such as this one.
"And tell the bitch, whore that you're sleeping with, she messed with the wrong mama."
Michelle's anger wasn't limited to Nick, it seemed. She was furious with Tracy, too. She sent Tracy several text messages, including one asking her to tell Nick to come home, because that's where he belongs. Another said, "You'll be seeing my face in your dreams very soon because I'll be there when you open your eyes in the morning and when you close them at night." Michelle proceeded to stalk Tracy, following her the 40 miles from Pella to Ottumwa on March 20th and pulling in behind her at a gas station. Tracy called the police, frightened for her life. She said, "I've been told she might have guns." Nothing came of this specific incident, but this was part of an escalating pattern of stalking that held the threat of violence. And less than 2 months later, Tracy would be dead and Michelle would be charged with murder. But what lay behind this devastating crime? The killing of a hard-working mother of 4. Michelle was jealous and obsessive over her estranged husband, though they'd separated because of her lack of affection and harsh treatment. In her house, the police also found a calendar on which she'd been marking the days since the separation, building up to the day when she would try to get him back. In May 2020, the world was in the height of the pandemic, and her lawyers seized on this as a mitigating factor, not denying that she'd killed Tracy, but suggesting it had been the product of an emotional breaking point.
How did you feel when you realized on March 12th that Nick had left?
Heartbroken, sad, despondent, devastated, destroyed. Like, my whole life had just walked out the door. How is the pandemic affecting my life? I just didn't have anything. I didn't have any money. I didn't have any food. I didn't have anybody to talk to about my situation.
And you weren't getting work at the hospital?
I wasn't getting work at the hospital.
It was the defense's claim that Michelle was in a fraught mental state when she spotted Nick's red pickup at a laundromat on the evening of May 18, 2020. As her story went, she was going out to get food with her last $6. On her way back, she saw the truck and she pulled in behind it in the parking lot. When Tracy came out of the laundromat and started driving, Michelle followed.
I just watched her and I followed her to wherever she was going because I wanted to know where my husband was living.
Tracy and Nick had developed a domestic routine. Whenever he was working late at Vermeer Manufacturing, she would drop off dinner for him. This ordinary Monday evening was no exception. Tracy drove to Burger King, unaware that Michelle was tailing her. She took Nick his food at work and then drove home, with the silver Cadillac following behind her all the way.
She stopped at the apartments that him and I had our first apartment at when we got together 21 years ago.
Tracy and Nick were living together in the same complex where Michelle and Nick had first lived, embarking on their life together as a couple. All this, Michelle's lawyers argued, contributed to an altered mental state.
And I wanted her to leave him. And I got out of the truck. I got out of the car. And I went around to talk to her. And I opened the truck door. And she started hitting me and screaming at me, calling me a crazy bitch. She was hitting me and hitting me and hitting me, and I had my hands up. She's yelling at me. And I just snapped and I grabbed the knife and I just stabbed her and I dropped the knife and I went back around the car and went home.
Michelle claimed she kept the knife in her car for self-defense, that she was scared for her life all the time because Nick, her protector, had left her. She said the knife had been on the front seat of her Cadillac parked next to the truck, and that somehow she'd reached for it in blind panic after her glasses had fallen off. She claimed that self-defense was also the reason for the tools the officer had found in her car. But her paranoia about being attacked did not explain the latex gloves or the binoculars. Far from an incident of self-defense or a mental break, these two pieces of evidence suggested that the attack had been premeditated, that Michelle had followed Tracy home with the sole purpose of catching her alone and unawares in order to kill her, removing her from Nick's life for good. The defense was asking for a charge of voluntary manslaughter instead of murder, claiming that this was an isolated, unpremeditated break driven by the isolation of the pandemic. But we all lived through the trials of the pandemic in 2020, and very few of us were driven to murder as a result. The jury did not agree with Michelle's defense. She'd behaved rationally in the aftermath of the murder, going home to wash the blood off her face, putting her bloodied clothes in the washing machine, and hiding the latex gloves. She'd also disposed of the murder weapon, rinsing it off and putting it under the sink in the bathroom, which was effective enough that the police didn't identify it in their initial search. And then she'd lied to the police.
Did you tell them that you stabbed Tracy?
No.
Did you tell them that you hadn't seen Tracy in months?
Yes, that's what I told them. I lied to the police because since I knew I was in trouble and I was scared and I didn't know what to do. I was so scared.
This was not a convincing argument for manslaughter. It made it only clearer to the jury that this had been murder. They convicted Michelle Boat of murder in the first degree after less than an hour's deliberation, and she was sentenced to life imprisonment. She tried to appeal the verdict on the basis of a request to strike a juror that had been denied, and also because of prosecutorial error, claiming that the prosecutor had made implications about how the levels of offenses could be used as punishment in the closing arguments. She also challenged her ability to pay restitution in the amount of $6,673.75. The court denied these three claims and reaffirmed the verdict and her sentencing. She remains in prison today. Meanwhile, Tracy's 4 children remain in touch with Nick, saying it's what their mother would have wanted. What do you think about this tragic story? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay safe, keep up with our channel, and we will see you very soon on The Decoder.